Shalom and welcome back to the channel. This week we are exploring Parashat Shemini, Leviticus chapter 9 through chapter 11, entirely through the lens of the Zohar. No Talmud, no Midrash Rabbah, just the Zohar. And what the Zohar reveals about this portion is extraordinary because Shemini is not just a story about the 8th day of the Tabernacle. It is a teaching about what happens when the finite touches the infinite and what happens when that contact is not properly contained. So let us begin. The Zohar opens its discussion of Parashat Shemini with a verse from the book of Job. Rabbi Isaac stands up and quotes chapter 38, verse 7. When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Now, why would the Zohar open a discussion about the Tabernacle with a verse about stars singing? Because the Zohar is telling us that the inauguration of the Mishkan was not just an earthly event. It was a cosmic event. When the priests began their service on the 8th day, the upper worlds responded. The angels above could not sing their song until Israel below initiated theirs. That is the Zohar's principle. The awakening from below triggers the response from above. The Zohar then encodes this numerically. The 8 words of that verse from Job, when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy, have a total gematria that is 18 times 63. And 63 is the value of Sak, which is the filling of the divine name that corresponds to Binah. 18 times Sak. The Zohar is telling us through the numbers themselves that this event was a revelation of Binah in the world. And this is the secret of the number 8. Shemini means the 8th. The Zohar teaches that 7 corresponds to the 7 lower Sefirot from Hesed down to Malkuth. These are the 7 days of creation, the 7 days of the week, the 7 days of the inauguration ceremony. But 8th, the Zohar tells us, corresponds to Binah. Binah is the 8th Sephirah, counting from the bottom. And Binah is where the life force of the entire creation originates. It is the great supernal mother from whom all sustenance flows into the lower worlds. That is why circumcision happens on the 8th day. Why the 8th day of Sukkot, Shemini Atzeret, is a separate holiday. Why after counting 7 weeks of the Omer, we receive the Torah on the first day of the 8th week. The Zohar is consistent about this. 8th is the gateway to Binah. 8th is where the vessel becomes capable of receiving a higher order of light. And that is exactly what was supposed to happen on this day in the Tabernacle. Now, the Zohar gives us a remarkable teaching about Aaron's sacrifice. Moses tells Aaron to take a young calf for a sin offering. And the Zohar says plainly, this calf was to atone for the sin of the golden calf. Aaron was the one who facilitated the golden calf. He was the one who shaped it. And so Aaron had to be the one to rectify it. The Zohar teaches that during the 7 days of inauguration, Aaron was being purified, level by level, Sefirah by Sefirah. Each day filled his vessel with more light, preparing him for the 8th day when he would finally stand before the Holy One and offer the sacrifice that would erase the stain. Rabbi Elazar adds a beautiful layer to this in the Zohar. He speaks of a supernal oil, the abundance of Chokhmah flowing into Binah, that flows down to the 7 Sefirot and lights the 7 lamps. During those 7 days, Aaron was being anointed internally by this supernal oil. The 7 lamps of the menorah correspond to the 7 Sefirot, and as each lamp was kindled through Aaron's service, his vessel was being prepared to hold the fullness of the 8th day. The Zohar says explicitly that acts performed below are reflected above. What Aaron was doing in the physical tabernacle was simultaneously happening in the supernal realms. And there is more. The Zohar asks, why also a ram? And the answer is stunning. The ram connects to the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. The ram that Abraham offered in place of his son. Isaac represents the left column, Gevurah, the side of strict judgment. Malkuth, the Shekinah, is built from the left side, and so the ram was brought as a burnt offering to sweeten the judgment of the left column and complete Malkuth with perfection. The calf heals the sin, the ram elevates and sweetens. Together, they restore the balance between mercy and judgment that the golden calf had shattered. And then it happens. Leviticus 9, verse 24. Fire came forth from before the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the fat parts on the altar. And all the people saw, and they shouted, and they fell on their faces. The Zohar tells us that on this day there was peace everywhere, above and below. The sin of the golden calf was wiped out. The Shekinah descended and rested in the Tabernacle. Heaven and earth were unified. This was the moment Israel had been waiting for since Sinai. But then everything changes. Leviticus 10, verse 1, Nadav and Avihu, the sons of Aaron, each took his fire pan, put fire in it, placed incense upon it, and brought before the Lord a strange fire, which he had not commanded them. And fire came forth from the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. Now, the conventional reading is that they were punished. They broke the rules, and God struck them down. But the Zohar gives us a completely different framework. The Zohar teaches that Nadav and Avihu were not wicked. They were not rebels. They were overwhelmed by a longing for unfiltered divine union. When they saw the fire descend from heaven and consume the offering, when they witnessed the full revelation of the Shekinah, they were overcome with ecstasy. They wanted to merge with that light completely. They wanted to dissolve into the source. The Zohar reveals that Nadav and Avihu were one soul. Their names together, Nadav and Avihu, have a numerical value of 91, which is the same value as Amen, and the same value as the unification of the upper and lower names of God, the Havayah and Adonai combined. They were operating on the level of angelic unification. Everything they wanted was to draw light into the world and serve the Creator at the highest possible level. The Kabbalistic tradition, building on the Zohar, tells us that the souls of Nadav and Avihu came from the soul of Nefesh of Adam Harishon, the first man. Nadav also carried parts of the level of Ruach of Adam. They were responsible for a correction of the highest order. When they saw the tabernacle completed and the light descending, they expected to see the full glory of the Shekinah permanently dwelling in Malkuth. But it was not yet time. God's plan was to bring that permanent unification on the seventh day, on Shabbat. Nadav and Avihu tried to force the completion before its appointed time. They did the right thing, but their vessel was not ready for it. And the timing was not theirs to decide. So, what went wrong? The Zohar, along with the Kabbalists who expand on it, explains that Nadav and Avihu separated Binah from Chokhmah. They drew their inspiration from the well springs of Binah, seeking the sublime spiritual experiences that characterize that realm. But they detached those experiences from Chokhmah, which is the higher wisdom of Torah, the wisdom that grounds and channels the light. They pursued mystical union without the vessel to contain it. They ascended without anchoring. In Kabbalistic language, they had razzo, the running toward God, but no shof, no return to the world below. And this is the deeper secret the Zohar is teaching. The light of Binah is real. The ecstasy of divine encounter is real, but without proper containment, without the discipline of the vessel, that same light becomes a consuming fire. The very fire that descended from heaven to accept the offerings also consumed those who approach without the proper structure. The same energy, the same source, it is the vessel that determines whether the light builds or destroys. The Zohar also notes that Nadav and Avihu had no children. They had no wives. Their service of God was entirely personal and internal. It could not be transmitted to future generations. The Zohar sees this as connected to their error. A priest must be married before entering the sanctuary because the union of male and female below mirrors and activates the union above. Without that grounding in partnership in the physical world, their offering was incomplete. Their fire was strange because it lacked the vessel of relationship. And then comes one of the most powerful moments in the entire Torah. Moses speaks to Aaron. He says, "This is what the Lord spoke. Through those who are near to me, I will be sanctified." And Aaron was silent. Vayidom Aharon. The Zohar takes this silence very seriously. The Zohar teaches that God Himself is silent in a similar way during the exile of Israel. As long as the community of Israel is in exile, the voice is withdrawn from her and the word does not function. Aaron's silence mirrors a cosmic silence. It is not the absence of feeling. It is the presence of something so vast that no words can contain it. Aaron had just witnessed the highest revelation of the Shekinah, and in the very same hour, he lost 2 sons. The Zohar teaches that in such moments, silence is not passivity. It is the deepest form of acceptance, where the soul absorbs what the mind cannot process. Aaron's silence is the silence of Binah itself, the understanding that transcends speech. Now, the Zohar connects all of this to the second half of the portion, which is the dietary laws. And most people think these laws are about health or hygiene. The Zohar sees them entirely differently. The Zohar teaches at folio 36 that the laws of kashrut are designed to refine the soul and align it with the divine order. Animals that are permitted for consumption carry spiritual energies that are compatible with holiness. Animals that are forbidden carry forces that connect a person to the Sitra Akhra, the other side. The Zohar is explicit about this. Those who eat forbidden food connect themselves to the other side and draw impure spirit upon themselves. The image of the Holy One is removed from them. This is not a metaphor. The Zohar sees food as a direct interface between the physical body and the spiritual worlds. What you consume literally shapes the quality of your vessel. Kosher food maintains the vessel's capacity to hold divine light. Non-kosher food dulls and coarsens the vessel, making it progressively harder to receive higher illumination. And the Zohar goes even further. It says the time of eating is a time of battle. Every meal is a spiritual battlefield where the soul either advances toward holiness or retreats toward the shells, the klipot. This is why the portion places the dietary laws right after the death of Nadav and Avihu. The connection is intentional. Nadav and Avihu lost their lives because they could not contain the fire. The dietary laws exist to help us build and maintain the vessel that can contain it. The Zohar also teaches that the priests were forbidden to drink wine before serving in the Tabernacle, not because wine is inherently evil, but because the priest must have absolute clarity of mind. The priest stands at the intersection between heaven and earth, mediating between the divine and the human. He must be able to distinguish between the holy and the common, between the pure and the impure. Any cloudiness, any distortion of perception can lead to the kind of error that cost Nadav and Avihu their lives. So, what is the Zohar's message for us from Parashat Shemini? It comes down to this. The light is real. The fire that descended on the 8th day was real. The longing that Nadav and Avihu felt was not wrong. It was holy. But the vessel matters. The channel matters. The discipline matters. We are meant to reach toward heaven. Yes. We are meant to experience the ecstasy of divine encounter. But we are also meant to come back, to ground that light in Torah study, to ground it in mitzvot, to ground it in relationship, to ground it in the choices we make every single day, including what we put into our bodies. The 8th day is the day Binah touches the world, but Binah only enters a vessel that has been prepared through the 7 days of work before Shabbat, the 7 Sefirot that build the structure of the soul. Without that preparation, the light of the 8th day has nowhere to land, and when infinite light meets an unprepared vessel, the result is shattering. Nadav and Avihu teach us the cost of spiritual ambition without spiritual discipline. Aaron's silence teaches us the depth of acceptance that is required when we stand in the presence of mysteries we cannot explain. And the dietary laws teach us that holiness is not confined to the temple or the meditation chamber. Holiness lives in the kitchen. Holiness lives in the everyday. Holiness lives in the choices that seem small but shape the entire architecture of our soul. May we all have the fire of Nadav and Avihu, the yearning to draw close to the infinite, and may we also have the wisdom to build the vessel that can hold that fire without being consumed. That is the teaching of Shemini. That is the wisdom of the Zohar. Thank you very much for watching. If this resonated with you, like and please subscribe and leave a comment below. I will see you in the next video. Shalom.